Welcome to Sincerely Me, a podcast about self-discovery and inner work so you can cultivate a deeper relationship to yourself and show up more fully in your work and life. My name is Tallia and I'm honored to be your host. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast and happy almost December. What in the world is happening? Where is time going? I have no idea. But if you're anything like me, you are also looking very much forward to slowing down your pace as you head into the holiday season. I, for one, cannot wait for my upcoming trips. For Thanksgiving, we're leaving to go to Asheville, up in the mountains for a couple days, and then my husband, my sister, and I are heading out to Europe for 6 days to get a taste and glimpse of the Christmas markets and spend some time in some cold weather. So I'm really looking forward to that, getting out of my environment and just kind of nurturing myself, comforting myself, taking care of myself around people that I love. So today's conversation is all about accountability, and the lovely guest who you'll be listening to is Marissa. Marissa is one of the partners at Accountability Works. She is a behavior change specialist and helps people harness the power of mindfulness to accomplish their goals consistently. She has a background in integrative health and mindfulness-based stress reduction and contributes regularly to Thrive Global, also has a podcast and just is doing wonderful things out in the world. And what we're going to be talking about today is the power of accountability. And I know accountability can be somewhat of an overused word, but really it's about commitment and about taking action consistently to get to where you want to be. And you'll hear a lot of our conversation being about how, commitment is what drives action. And when we feel like there aren't consequences to not taking action, we often won't. We also talk a lot about the power that we have to make choices in our lives and how much freedom comes with the power to choose. We talk about how commitment is not, in fact, a one-time thing, but it's something you have to do over and over again. And that the two things at the end of the day that you need to do if you're ready to make a significant change in your life is, number one, make the decision, and number two, commit to it. I kind of opened myself up as a bit of a case study since I'm having a little bit of trouble in my own life committing and taking consistent action towards my goals. So Marissa is such a powerhouse when it comes to coaching people through what's holding them back. I had the honor and privilege of being gifted by Marissa with a 90-minute strategy session, and she helped me get so clear and focused on my goals for 2020. I could not be more excited, more motivated. Yes, I am tired right now, but I know that with the right amount of rest, I'll be able to hit the ground walking first and then slowly jogging so I can eventually get to a good run in 2020. With that being said, here's my conversation with Miss Marissa. Hi, Marissa. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Hi, Tallia. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited for this conversation today. It could not be more timely for my own kind of personal struggles and challenges that I'm facing in life. So I'm open to totally becoming a case study that we kind of unpack in the conversation today. But I would love to start by presenting the problem it is that you solve as one of the ladies behind Accountability Works, and letting that guide the rest of our conversation today.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. So tell me about the problem. What is it that you all are solving through your work?
Taking action consistently.
Okay, so the problem is that we don't know how to take action consistently.
The problem is that we all know we need to be taking action consistently, but we don't actually take action consistently.
Yeah. I can relate. I can totally relate.
Oh, I can relate too.
Yeah. I'm like, there are so many things that I know that I want to do, and that I say I'm going to do, but my husband will be the first to tell you that I've been talking about it for a long time. And there is no consistent commitment, and commitment has been like such a central big word for me these days. So you all have very clearly found a solution to the problem. Again, the problem being doing what you actually say you're going to do by committing through taking action consistently. So tell us about what you all have found the solution to this problem to be.
Accountability. I think when a lot of us think about accountability, we think about, like that stern teacher, that slap on the wrist. Sometimes there can be even shame associated with accountability, that you're showing up and there's a harshness to it. Did you do it? Did you not do it? And if you didn't do whatever you said you were going to do, that you should almost, in a sense, feel embarrassed by it. We don't deliver that type of accountability at all. We have a very compassionate based, which we call mindfulness based accountability, which is accountability. The power of it is that you literally have to show up and say, I did it and I didn't do it. And taking that a step further, which is what we're there to help people do, is to say, well, if you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? And that just gives an opportunity to expand our awareness, to reflect. And that awareness then guides that next step, that next commitment. So that what's happening is you're actually growing. You are becoming more self-aware. And the reason why accountability works is because, one, there's not just a coach on the other side, there's a community. So, we do small groups. We also do one-on-one. But there is a little bit of that pressure, right, of having to show up to your coach or to your peers and your coach and say whether or not you did something. And there is an extra motivation that comes to wanting to show up and say that you accomplished what you set out to do.
Yeah. So this brings up a couple of things for me. And I talk a lot about, what keeps us stuck, what holds us back, what prevents us or creates resistance to taking action. And one of the questions I ask a lot of people is, what's the consequence to not taking action? And until there's a consequence, you're probably not going to. And what I'm hearing is that through the work you all do, through the accountability, through the constant, the continuous, the consistent check-ins, the community, there is a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
There is a consequence to not taking action. And until there is one, it's hard to muster up the motivation, the willpower, whatever it is you think you need to do it on your own. And I was reading through your website, and one of the things it continued to reiterate was that, it's not that you're not determined. It's not that you're not a driven person. It's not that you're not capable. So it's not about you and your innate abilities whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But that we do require something external to be held accountable to create the consequence to not taking action and to show up for outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth talking about, because I think a lot of times we will get so in our own minds and in our own heads and start creating these stories about ourselves and what it says about us that we're not able to move forward on. Like, oh, well, I'm fill in the blank. I'm so lazy. I'm so stuck. I'm not motivated enough. I don't know what I want. I don't lack clarity. I don't lack confidence. Some of that might be true, but a lot of times it's probably not at all about you. It probably says a lot less about you than you think it might. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's 100% right on. But the ultimate consequence, right, is that whatever you want to do or accomplish will not actually get done. So when you think about it week to week, it's everything that you just described. But when you really stop and you think about your life and you flash forward 30, 40 years, you flash forward a year, 3 months, and you think about what you want to have accomplished in your life. If you don't show up, if you don't commit and take that consistent action, those things will not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what ultimately drives Allie and me, is that we really want to help people accomplish all the things they want to do in their life. And it doesn't matter if it's a health related goal, it's a business they want to build, it is a nonprofit they want to start, whatever that is. So sometimes we need to zoom out and we need to go there, because that's when our level of commitment and our connection to our why, what motivates us, happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going through a coaching training program right now. And one of the things that really stuck with me is that until you choose and decide to commit fully to yourself, you're never going to grow into and become the person you're meant to become.
Mm-hmm.
And that so much of what that requires, aside from accountability, is what he calls the grand vision. Like, what are you actually committing to outside of the kind of short-term thing, right? Like, there's the book you want to write, there's the fitness goal you want to hit, there's the business you want to start. But beyond that, what is it that you're committing to, and how can you let that guide you in bigger ways that kind of forces you to level up and expand and step into another version of yourself that accomplishing or achieving that grand vision is going to require. And anyways, I loved the idea of that grand vision, and found myself kind of stopping in my own tracks and realizing how little time and space I've given myself recently to really connect with and see for myself what that grand vision is. And I think that's a little bit of what's making it hard for me to feel fully committed to any one thing. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of things at about 50% right now.
Mm-hmm.
And a big thing that is missing for me is accountability. Like, there's no one doing this with me. There's no one who I'm checking in with, really. There is felt consequence to not taking action, but I end up just doing whatever's urgent and like needs to happen day of kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And have just felt very the way I keep explaining it to people is like, I feel like I'm sitting on a gold mine. Like, when you have these grand visions, you have these goals, you have these things you want to do, but you're not taking consistent action. It feels like you're sitting on so much that's just waiting to kind of like present itself to the world. And the only thing that's stopping it from doing so is you and your lack of action and the lack of accountability. And so this is just making me think a lot about what it is that I actually need right now, because I assume that many folks listening find themselves in similar positions or situations where they're just like, so much is going on, but I feel pulled in so many different directions, and I don't feel fully committed to any one thing right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're definitely not alone. I think we could all relate to that. I think a lot of it has to do with the time that we live in. You know, there's so much coming at us all the time. And I think, you know, somebody like yourself and doing the work that you're doing, there's a certain amount that you feel required to do, right? You need to have a presence on social media. You need to be at live events. You're spending a certain amount of time with clients. You are spending a certain amount of time creating the work that you do and that you deliver to people. You are married and you have a dog and you have friends and family and all these things, right? So there's a lot happening, and we live in a world that really does give you a badge for busyness. And
Yeah.
I know that's a hot topic right now, and I'm really happy about that because, you know, there's a difference between having a very full life that you're very conscious of what and where your time is going than just filling it up because you feel like that just means you're, you know, maybe a higher functioning person or, you know, whatever accolades you're going to get because your schedule is jam packed. So I think there's that. And then there's also the shiny object syndrome that we see all the time in our work. And, you know, the entrepreneurial types tend to really have this. And that, you know, it can be an idea. It could be, you know, the latest software. I mean, it could show up in so many different ways. And so this is where, let's say, you know, the work that we do, we make people pick 3 goals. What are your top 3 priorities right now over the next 12 weeks? And that's it. Nothing else is brought to the call. No commitment is made that is not in support of those 3 goals. And the whole point is that you bring those to completion, that you go all in. You bring them to completion. If at the end of 12 weeks you say, I don't want to continue on with that, that's fine. So I guess for a question I have for you is, like, if you had to say right now, like, what are the top 3 things that are the most important to you that you would be willing to go all in on? What would they be?
Oh my God. That is the hardest question for me to answer, Marissa.
Why? Why is it so hard?
Oh, because I feel like everything is important right now. I feel like, yeah, I don't even know. I like everything feels like it's at the same level of importance, which is the problem. And I know what I want one of the priorities to be, and it's not at all work related, but it's to invest and commit to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one. That is the highest one.
Mm-hmm.
That's clear. But if I had to, like, all the different goals that are in the category of work all feel equally important. And I think it's just because I go to, like, there's so much more potential to optimize everything that I'm doing. Like, there's so much more I could be doing with the podcast. There's so much more I could be doing with my coaching programs. There's so much more I could be doing on social and with content. I haven't yet started a blog. Like, there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would definitely need help focusing on the most important, at least for the next, 12 weeks, to use the framework that you all work with.
Mm-hmm. So they're all important. So then it comes down to what makes the most sense to focus on next.
Yeah. And what makes the most sense to hand off, because goodness knows, this is work for more than one human being.
Yes, it definitely sounds like it is. And I think that when you kind of say, okay, wow, this is all really important. Great. Okay. So what needs to happen next? And I think when you start to break it down that way, then you start to say, okay, this is what I need to do next. And this is what can be delegated next. Right. Mm-hmm. And you just keep it moving, because what happens, I think, if we don't do that, then all of a sudden, like you said, you feel like you're going 50% in on everything. And then sometimes nothing's getting delegated, or we're over delegating. And then we get overwhelmed because now it's costing too much. It's like all these different things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think, and I know if I sat down and I've done this to kind of like do a brain dump of all the things that the voice in my head and what I've heard a lot of coaches say is, focus on what's revenue generating, focus on what's going to bring in the most money. which I get, but I also think sometimes the things you really need to focus on aren't going to be revenue generating in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where I've not spent enough time is doing the things that I feel like I can continue putting off, but I feel like it's kind of coming to a head where I just can't. I could continue putting it off, but it's not going to get me anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and the other thing that I think comes up for me a lot that I mentioned to you before we started recording is the idea of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And how I just feel like I'm really not able to invest. Like, I feel like I'm in a season right now where I need to kind of put certain things on hold. And that also doesn't feel great, mostly because of the guilt I then begin to feel. But it would also be really freeing to kind of like send a mass email to everyone I know to be like, listen, I'm going to be in a hole for
Mm-hmm.
the next 2 months, and just kind of set some expectations so that I don't feel bad for not showing up. I don't feel bad for not investing and pouring into the people or the things that I've been known to pour into. So yeah, I'm just thinking out loud with this right now, but that definitely has been weighing on me over my head. Is like, okay, I'm not like, I haven't made time to call and invest in the friendships, and most of my friends are long distance, so that's like, it takes a little bit of added effort, and at the end of each day I'm just so exhausted, whether it's from having done a million things or just having been thinking about all the things that I need to do. Like, the mental exhaustion and decision fatigue is also very real for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have so little left to give, and am very used to giving a lot of myself to everyone else and everything else. So it's a very foreign place to be right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's dive into this sacrifice.
Yeah.
The feeling guilty to putting certain things on hold. I think that's a really real thing. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice can show up in so many ways, right? It's sometimes, and it hurts. It hurts. Sometimes it financially hurts. Sometimes it hurts because you can't spend as much time with people that you would like to, or that you love. And you know, obviously that's where the guilt comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's the psychological tricks and games that happen when we have to sacrifice in our lives. I mean, in my own journey, and when as you know, I coach people and watch people, I do think there is a certain level of sacrifice along the way. I think it changes, but I think it's part of it. I feel like sometimes it's present in our lives to just make us stare whatever it is in the face and go, yeah, I really want this, because I'm willing to sacrifice for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is that saying? That it's a value. It's like you're willing to sacrifice time in your life, years of your life, right? Like, it's a really real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you have to let it hurt a little. I think you have to let the guilt kind of be there. And then I think through that, you feel empowered by it.
Empowered by, like, sitting in the guilt, feeling the guilt.
You start to feel empowered by the sacrifice.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. I think that when something means so much to you, it's one thing when it means so much to you and things are moving along beautifully, and in some ways it's easy to do, even though you're putting in the effort, of course. your real commitment to things is tested when there are the obstacles. The sacrifice is there. That's when you really connect to your why and why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And that's when I think you get empowered. Yeah. And you draw strength from it. You're like, I can do this.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you to elaborate on that. I think what that speaks to is in the power of choice, and how every choice you make either supports your commitment or does not support your commitment, and how it's in those moments of choice where you're presented with the opportunity, and this ties so well into mindfulness, where you're presented with the opportunity to affirm what's important to you. And I think we lose sight of that power, the power to choose differently in every single moment that we have in life.
Yes.
And how in those choices, and it sounds so simple, but for me, like, I'm really trying to live with the intention right now of being someone who commits, being someone who is committed as kind of a state of being, and who doesn't leave things unfinished. And I tend to leave a lot of things unfinished. I have entrepreneur syndrome. I have a million ideas and I never follow through because I just don't have the capacity to do it all. And one of the small ways I'm affirming this attention through affirming the intention through my choices and actions is in not leaving any dishes unwashed. I tend to leave a lot of dishes in the sink and, I'll come back to this later, and it just sits there unfinished. And so again, in small ways, it's these small choices that I'm making now where it's like, no, if I'm a committed person, if I'm someone who doesn't let things go unfinished, that means that I wash the dish as I use it and it doesn't pile up. And now, we've shifted, we've made a change in behavior because of this commitment I've made to myself, to being this person, to living in alignment with this intention. And it's different than having dishes on my to-do list, right? Like, this doesn't mean that I'm now checking it off as a thing to do, but it's something I'm doing because it's a different way of expressing who I want to be.
I love that. And you're exactly right. It shows up in the little ways, the little things that we're doing, the choices that we're making. I love the dishes unwashed example. I also think it's simply, when you say to somebody, "Oh, I'm going to call you back in an hour," and then you don't call them back and you feel bad about it, right?
Yep.
It shows up in so many ways. And that's exactly right. It's who you want to become. It's how you want to be moving through life and the person you're evolving into. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think we all come up on that at different times in our lives.
Yeah.
Because doing things consistently, bringing things to completion, like, these are timeless problems.
Yeah. You will never run out of work to do. I will tell you that.
It's just it's just there. It's just human behavior. But I do think the more that we show up every day, like you said, and realize that every single thing that we do is a choice. And we do that over and over again. That's how we evolve. That's how we grow into the people that we want to grow into.
And to your point, I think it's worth noting that when you commit to something, you're not done committing. It's a recommitment every day.
Yes.
That's what I'm realizing now. I'm like, okay, you say you commit to this thing, but tomorrow you have to actively, it's a practice. It's a recommitment consistently in a way that I think many of us forget to do it that way. We think once we've made our minds up, once we've made the decision, the work is done. No, the work has just begun.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I know that's one of the things you all say too is, the two things that you need to do if you're ready to make change in your life. The first is to decide what you want, make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is in the commitment to taking the small steps it's going to take to get there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Making the decision on what you want is a